Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of Havana Syndrome, the mystery illness attacking diplomats. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. Beginning in 2016, American diplomats and intelligence officers stationed in Havana, Cuba, began experiencing a distinctive cluster of symptoms: a sudden onset of nausea, headaches, and auditory sensations, a piercing, directional sound that seemed to come from one specific area, followed in some cases by persistent cognitive impairment, memory problems, headaches, and balance disorders. The symptoms began abruptly, and for some have continued for years. The phenomenon became known as Havana Syndrome, and within months it was reported not only in Havana, but in US embassies in China, Russia, Germany, Colombia, and eventually inside CIA headquarters and the White House grounds. More than 1,000 US government personnel have reported symptoms. The cause, despite extensive investigation by the US government, the National Institutes of Health, and multiple academic institutions, remains contested. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The 20th and 21st centuries were supposed to be the age of answers. Science had decoded DNA, split the atom, put humans on the moon, and mapped the genome. By the logic of accelerating discovery, every mystery should be converging toward explanation. And yet the ledger of genuinely unexplained phenomena, events witnessed by credible observers, investigated by serious researchers, and still lacking a satisfying account, has not shrunk. If anything, it has grown. Part of this is a failure of classification. Phenomena that do not fit established categories tend to be dismissed rather than investigated, filed under anecdotal or mass hysteria, and removed from serious consideration. This is not always wrong. Genuine hoaxes and misperceptions account for a large portion of anomalous reports. But the dismissal is sometimes premature, and the cost is real. Cases that might have yielded genuine insight are closed before they are fully examined. Witnesses are discredited. Evidence is lost. The question is never properly asked. The cases that endure, that survive rigorous scrutiny, and still refuse to yield to conventional explanation, are a small but significant set. They share certain characteristics: multiple independent witnesses, physical evidence consistent with witness testimony, and a complete absence of any plausible prosaic explanation that accounts for all the data. These are not ghost stories. They are open problems in empirical science, waiting for someone with the right tools and the intellectual courage to take them seriously. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Havana Syndrome, the mystery illness attacking diplomats, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The first cases of what became known as Havana Syndrome were reported by U.S. diplomatic personnel in Havana, Cuba, in late 2016. Physicians noted that the symptom cluster, cognitive impairment, balance disorders, tinnitus, and persistent headaches, was unlike any known disease and resembled the effects of physical trauma to the brain. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered medical examination of affected personnel by University of Pennsylvania researchers, published in JAMA in 2018, found neuroimaging abnormalities in 21 of 23 affected individuals compared to healthy controls, including differences in white matter integrity and BRA. In volume, this finding supported the hypothesis that a physical agent had caused measurable brain injury. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. A 2020 report from the National Academies of Sciences concluded that directed pulsed radio frequency, RF energy, was the most plausible mechanism for the observed symptoms, a conclusion that pointed toward a technological weapon capable of producing neurological injury at a distance. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, a 2023 U.S. intelligence community assessment produced by 7 intelligence agencies concluded that most cases were unlikely to be caused by a foreign adversary and were attributable to pre-existing conditions, environmental factors, or medical diagnoses. This conclusion was rejected by many affected personnel and members of Congress as premature and inadequately supported. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of Russia's GRU military intelligence has been identified in reporting as the most likely candidate for operating a directed energy weapon program capable of producing Havana Syndrome symptoms. Russia has denied any involvement. China, Cuba, and other adversary states have also been suggested. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Cases reported inside the White House compound and near the ellipse in Washington, D.C. in 2021, along with cases in Vienna, Austria, which became a particular hotspot, indicated that whatever the cause, it was not limited to overseas diplomatic posts, but was occurring in domestically sensitive locations. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Havana Syndrome, the mystery illness attacking diplomats. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Havana Syndrome is caused by a foreign adversary's directed energy weapon, specifically a device that uses pulsed radio frequency or microwave energy to produce neurological effects at a distance. The National Academies of Sciences 2020 report identifies this as the most plausible explanation, consistent with symptoms, neuroimaging findings, and the directional nature of the reported auditory sensations. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Havana Syndrome is a multifactorial phenomenon in which some cases involve genuine physical injury from an unknown cause, while others represent anxiety, functional neurological disorder, or mass psychogenic illness in a highly stressed population of intelligence personnel. The 2023 Intelligence Community Assessment leans toward this interpretation. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that Havana Syndrome reflects the accidental exposure of diplomatic personnel to surveillance technology, either RF surveillance equipment operating at higher than intended power levels, or a weaponized anti-surveillance device being used to protect sensitive facilities from U.S. electronic eavesdropping. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Havana Syndrome, the mystery illness attacking diplomats, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the JAMA 2018 study finding neuroimaging abnormalities in affected personnel is the strongest physical evidence for organic brain injury in at least some cases, distinguishing the condition from purely psychological phenomena. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the directional nature of the reported auditory sensations, described as coming from one specific direction and stopping when individuals moved out of the affected area, is inconsistent with internal tinnitus or psychological origin and consistent with a directional external energy source. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the geographic clustering of cases in specific diplomatic locations, including Havana, Vienna, and Washington, D.C., suggests a common external cause that targets specific people in specific locations rather than a random individual medical or psychological condition. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Havana Syndrome, the mystery illness attacking diplomats. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Havana Syndrome remains an active and politically sensitive investigation. The U.S. Havana Act of 2021 authorized medical benefits for affected personnel. Affected diplomats have sued the State Department for failing to protect them and for dismissing their symptoms. The divergence between the 2020 National Academy's conclusion pointing to a directed energy weapon and the 2023 Intelligence Community Assessment discounting foreign involvement reflects genuine scientific and intelligence uncertainty, or possibly, critics allege, political pressure to avoid a confrontational conclusion. The affected personnel have not received resolution. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Havana Syndrome, the mystery illness attacking diplomats, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Havana Syndrome ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.